Good evening. The discussion today is on knowing the self. On one hand, this is like such a obvious subject. It uh, it is not even discussed in in the society because we might think we know this anyway, and and why are we discussing it? In spiritual discipline, the basic premise is at present we are under a delusion. And when we are under this huge delusion, we don't even know who I am, or we got a wrong understanding of who I am. This can happen in many levels. For example, if someone is acting in a drama, and if he was to play the part continuously in a certain role, it's possible for him to completely lose himself in that role. It is called identification crisis. Normally, a person with that situation will be seeking advice from the doctors, or others will take him to the doctors. But if everyone in the community are in the same mode, including the doctors, then this becomes a norm. And here we have created a society like this. This is the understanding in the spiritual discipline, that we have lost ourselves into the theater, in the drama script, to such a level that we have created a community, society under that spell of delusion. Now, delusion may create a little bit of excitement. That's why people in delusion may have some their own happiness. But it is a bubble. You are living in a bubble. Sooner or later, it will burst, and it will be painful, immensely painful. So, also here, to spend our life in that delusion, in that bubble, and suddenly to realize that your everything, what you stood for, right from the idea of who I am, was wrong. It is a shock, but it's a period of immense sorrow of all levels, regret, repentance, waste, depression, all of this. And this is why it is much better to question this, and and if it is a delusion, to come out of this when going is good, when we dismantle this bubble, it is far less painful than someone else is doing it for us. The language of soul exists. Half the population of this planet possibly know that soul exists, or they believe in some aspect that we are more than the body, some language like this. And I know people who had visions of the soul. I know people who had out of body experiences, near death experiences. But in spite of knowing this, nothing changes. They continue to live in that delusion. They know it is a delusion, but they feel that they either don't understand the value of coming out of it, or powerless to do anything about this. Here, what we are observing, the reality behind is of the angel. Soul, it is like the reality is, it is the angelic soul, which means the one who has the potential to experience rich heart, rich head, understanding at a At another level, understanding of truth, we can say, and also the heart, that is understanding, experiencing feelings, emotions of super sensuous level, and at the same time becoming free from these useless, petty things that we experience. Certainly becoming free from sorrows and desperations, desires, discovering that other mind. That's why the word angel is so appropriate for this. So, this delusion blocks this angel, and it is not just few have this privilege. This is a race of angels. We are the family of angelic souls, but collectively we have gone in this spell. The huge task to get this society out of this spell. But one beautiful positive aspect in this spell is created by us collectively. Why this spell is there? We all treat each other like that. That's why there is that spell. And we can break that spell also. If few people come out of this delusion and and see the reality differently, they contribute immensely to this community. And by that I meaning this family of souls, the human family. And there are answers at that level. In our present state, there are no answers. We are already experiencing the problem of that bubble. And um, and a problem there are questions at every level, whether it is environment, health, community, society, population, every level there are potential big problems and there are no answers. You step behind this, you discover there are answers. And most important aspect there is immortality. We discover our own immortality, discover the immortality of everyone. That dimension behind is an eternal dimension. And because of this, that personality that comes from it is a different personality. We all will have questions on this. And it's a soul, as we said, understanding is there, but there is something else, what we call soul consciousness. It is not just knowing the soul or believing in the soul, as was mentioned, that itself doesn't change much. But if this person is soul conscious, in other words, if the soul wakes up, is seeing the perspective beyond that theater. Otherwise, at present, the perspective is a ego perspective. So during these minutes, we are seeing from beyond the ego. And it is like a completely different view to everything that we are seeing. Different mind, different feelings, different understanding, and it grows. That process helps us understand what is possible for everyone. You realize everyone is angelic, not just as a belief, but you know that personality. The words by itself doesn't mean anything. You also understand what that supreme personality will be. Different game starts, different mind is in action. We call this step soul consciousness, and that is the meditation that that is based on soul consciousness, soul awareness. It is nicely described in that story, an eagle thinking it is a chicken and and working like a chicken, taking sorrow like a chicken. And we have to get this eagle, discover the eagle. Yes, so here all are eagles, but they are underestimating themselves, seeing themselves chicken, or just use a label of eagle to the chicken. So that is not a point. We have to discover the real person behind that role. The real person is invisible and subtle, not gross. Body and everything, it is at a gross level. This is another block for some people. How can something that is subtle exist? And in spiritual field, the whole emphasis is on invisible and subtle. It claims that what is gross is everything of the drama level. It is a material for the drama, and the reality exists at the invisible level. And good enough, the argument is good because this body eh, is not made for beyond the physical. Body is made for physical. So if the claim is that mm, the, there is a reality beyond the physical, this body that is made for physical is not going to help us. We have to start with maybe a model and see that in this model, in the invisible dimension reality, and we exist at that level and come into the physical world. Physical world is more like an experience. That is a model. Ordinarily, we can't prove that model to be wrong. That model has equal weight as opposed to the model, materialistic model. As we said, of course, that the physical body with the five senses are never going to help us discover it. But we can start playing with this model. And once we start playing with this model, we will discover that mind where there is no pain. And that itself may be evidence for us. If we want to look for some logical, you know, something to help us believe. And what is it? If any posture gives me pain, that is likely to be the wrong posture. Posture that doesn't give me pain is likely to be the right posture. That is our nature's message. So also in our life, if any model we play with and it creates in me pain, maybe emotional pain or psychological pain, that is likely to be the wrong model. If I play with the approach and there is no pain, then I can't easily ignore it. I may have to see that there may be some truth in it and might give us an idea of looking for bigger truth. Thank you. I know you might have some questions, and here are some questions also.
There is a question from Yan Yan. Is a feeling of insecurity coming from ego? And how to feel secure?
Yes, each of our ego is based on limited, based on temporary aspects. In other words, the theater. And we have created many of these false ego, which means ego based on body, job, people, possessions. Like, for example, I may create an ego based upon the car that I drive, ego based on job. And each of these aspects are unpredictable, temporary, and changing. And ego is constantly insecure constantly looking for dangers and different level of paranoia. That is the nature of every ego. And whether you give it what he wants, you give him more possessions, more comfort, and bigger, you know, position. Ego just gets bigger, and that insecurity continues. And surprisingly, that is the life led by large majority of the world. And it is like you're caught in a circle. You're all the time trying to feed this desperation of the ego. And more you feed it, it gets bigger. And whole life, you never win. There is an option. And the option is to come out of this bubble, come out of that whole thinking. As to start with, we can only experiment with this, see what it is like to be the observer of this theater right now, just like here. This is like a theater going on. In the same way, the whole hour, morning till night, it is a theater. This is a big theater, long theater. And the awake soul is watching this theater. And the soul is not extension of the role. Soul is completely independent. And just by getting the soul awake, witness, you discover that mind where he is not affected by anything that happens in this physical world. Experience that mind free from insecurity, mind where there is deep sense of security. And security is such an important thing. It brings out the best within us, just as insecurity brings out the worst within us. Thank you.
Another question: which would be the steps to practice soul consciousness in an accurate way?
Sure. The very first step would be what we call nishchay. It's a nice word, Sanskrit, and it means come to a certain level of conviction about this. It may start as a concept, belief, you're willing to try, play with it. It shouldn't be that I completely deny it as if I know it. Then one can't be soul conscious. But you are open to this, more open to play with it also. And then the next step would be to start playing with this observer. We are just seeing the perspective of the observer of the drama. And this part, including what we thought is I. Yes, during those minutes, one is observer of this role, the whole thing part. In this case, Prashant, observer of the larger drama. And as you start getting the experiences, they will help to take us to the next level. We will understand those feelings and we are willing to experiment being what it is, be the observer. The next nice practice is to understand what it is like to be a guest on this planet, guest in this body. A guest owns nothing and he loses nothing. We all like that feeling of a guest only because guest has no attachments. So the soul is a guest in this whole setup, and the only reason he lost his higher feelings was because of his attachments. More the attachments, proportionately more the misery. So we play with this for a few minutes, what it is like to be a guest, and that will lead us to the next further level. But all along, this is soul consciousness, to be the observer, to be the guest, to be seeing yourself as a traveler, seeing the soul, see the soul seated behind his eyes in this body right now. That soul is there and he is watching this funfair around. It's filming also is part of the funfair, and the soul is watching this funfair going on. He is not part of the funfair. He's from a different world and amused by everything that is going on. There may be in this funfair, there can be storm, there can be rain. He is watching the funfair. By doing this kind of a different approaches in a fun kind of way, everything is fun. This practice also is fun. We as if get the soul awake, and this getting the soul awake is a step to dismantle that bubble of delusion.
Another question from Crispian. An influence from outside can be body consciousness. Is this true?
Of course, um, because the world around is body conscious world at the moment, and as was said before, they treat you as if you are that role, you are the body. They think of you that way, and 100% of people we are interacting with, they treat us that way. And as we said, even those who know the soul, they are not paying attention to the soul. They are more paying attention to the role and the drama. So this is what is creating that spell and creating that collective delusion. But that's fine, we accept it and we have the option to break it. We don't complain about this. It is like once you come to a diagnosis, then we can proceed and we can take the steps. Everyone needs help, and if you and me understand this, we can create these minutes and minutes to break this spell. It is such a wonderful thing. Anyone can be in any remote corner on the planet, but if he understands the value of his mind and the value of his seconds, he is contributing immensely to this planet.